Before we begin, I just want to set up a disclaimer. It's kind of silly, I feel like, that I should even have to do this, but just in case, because this is a review, these are my opinions. It doesn't mean that anything that I say is like, this is absolute fact. I'm right and you're wrong. None of that. This is just what I took from the book. This is my opinion, therefore it is my review. Also, we have a guest today. You can see that's Luna. I hope you like dogs. If you don't, I'm not sure we can be friends. I'm just kidding. Kinda. But she's snoring, so you might hear her, you might not. Sorry. There's nothing I can really do about that. She's probably just going to be right there the whole time. So today I'm talking about the book called If It Rains by Jennifer L. Wright. This was published in 2019, and it takes place in the 30s during the Dust Bowl. Now, I don't usually do this. Usually, this is video number 3. I don't have a usually yet. However, I'm actually going to read the book description because I think it does summarize it really well, and I'll kind of give you, I guess, an idea of what we're going to get into and what we're going to talk about. So, the book summary says, and I'm sorry, but I am reading. You're going to notice. But anyway, a story of resilience and redemption set against one of America's defining moments, the Dust Bowl. It's 1935 in Oklahoma, and lives are determined by the dust. 14-year-old Kathryn Baile, a spitfire born with a severe clubfoot, is coming of age in desperate times. Once her beloved older sister marries, Kathryn's only comfort comes in the well-worn pages of her favorite book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Then, Kathryn's father decides to relocate to Indianapolis, and only the promise of a surgery to finally make her normal convinces Kathryn to leave Oklahoma behind. But disaster strikes along the way, and Kathryn must rely on her grit and the ragged companions she meets on the road if she is to complete her journey. Back in Boise City, Baile Mayfield is the newest member of the wealthiest family in all of Cimarron County. I don't know if that's pronounced Cimarron. I'm sorry if it's not. I should have looked it up and I didn't. So if you live there or you know about it and I'm totally butchering it, honestly, I really do apologize. In spite of her poor rural upbringing, Melissa has just married the town's most eligible bachelor and is determined to be everything her husband and her new social class expects her to be. But as the drought tightens its grip, Henry's true colors are revealed. Melissa covers her bruises with expensive new makeup and struggles to reconcile her affluent life with that of her starving neighbors. Haunted by the injustice and broken by Henry's refusal to help, Melissa secretly defies her husband, risking her life to follow God's leading. Two sisters, struggling against unspeakable hardship, discover that even in their darkest times, they are still united in spirit, and God is still with them, drawing them home. So that is the summary. Now, I want to make sure that this is I'm super clear about this because I don't like a bait and switch, So I just want to preface this by saying, yes, they talk about God, but this is not, I would not call it a Christian book. They just happen to talk about him in a very organic, natural way that anyone would have talked about, right? So I just want to make that very clear because I don't want it to deter you if that's not your thing, which is totally fine. I don't want you to think that this is all that this is about because it's not. So, okay, we're going to get into it. I want to just quickly say too, I love coming of age stories. They are my favorite. To Kill a Mockingbird, A Prayer for Owen Meany, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. These are some of my favorite books of all time. And they're all coming of age tales. I love it. I love that kind of story. This also takes place during the Dust Bowl. And I have to say, it was one of those things where I knew a little bit about the Dust Bowl. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know a lot about it. So, and granted, this book is a novel, it's fiction, but there were some stuff in it that really did happen, right? It's a historical fiction. So it made me really want to know more about the Dust Bowl and dive more into the history of what happened and why, which I did end up doing after I read the book. And I think that that's like a true sign of a really good book, is one that makes you want to know more when you're done with it, right? So that was really cool. And I might get some of this wrong because it's now been, I actually finished this book, I think back in February, maybe even January. So it's been a little bit, but if I get any of this wrong, I apologize. Again, I encourage you to look it up yourself if you're really interested. But took place in the 30s. It was almost like Boise City, Oklahoma was like the center of it. It's where like the worst of it happened, but it was pretty far reaching, right? It did cover a big portion of the country, in the middle of the country, but it was like you had these people who, were all living in Oklahoma, and they were doing these farming methods that really they shouldn't have been doing on that type of topography, right? The ground wasn't conducive to those types of farming methods. So because they got rid of a lot of like the grass in the fields, what happened was that combined with one of the worst droughts in history, the wind would start picking up and just blow the dust around, right? So that you think about like a strong windstorm, right? Like those straight line winds, but now picture that windstorm just full of dust and dirt, right? I mean, it was like a wall of dirt. It's crazy. So a lot of people, a lot of the farmers, they couldn't grow anything. A lot of them ended up having to leave. And so a lot of people left they just kept going west to California. The family in this book ended up going to Indianapolis, but you'll see why. But I also learned that is actually where the term the dirty 30s came from. It has nothing to do with turning 30. But, we just tend to take things and make them something different. But I just thought that was really, really fascinating. So if you're curious about it and you didn't know as much as I didn't know about it, I would really recommend looking into it. It is really fascinating. It's really sad because you have to think too, 1935, this is also when the Great Depression was going on. So it's like the Great Depression, the drought, no food, like they couldn't even grow their own food because the drought is happening. It's just like, and now all this dust. And so people were actually dying from something too called like dust pneumonia. So sad. It's really, really sad. But I'm glad that I, really took the time to learn more about it because I didn't know. So moving on. What's really cool about the book too is it goes back and forth, right? So there's 2 points of view. It's the 2 sisters, Kathryn and Melissa. And it goes back and forth. So like one chapter, it's from Kathryn's point of view, and the other chapter, it's Melissa's, and they just go back and forth. I really liked that. Some people, I think, don't, but I do. I thought that was really good. So now a little bit into some of the main characters. Kathryn is really your real main character, at least I think. In some ways, I think she was a very typical 14-year-old, but due to her like physical limitations, she lost her mom like in childbirth. Her mom didn't survive actually having her. And now her older sister, who's like the only person that she trusts, is moving out because she got married. She's had a lot to overcome. She has, clubfoot. And so she really struggles with like walking properly. It makes everything really difficult for her. And she does wear a brace through most of the book. I almost said the movie. The book. And so she's very prideful, right? She never wanted to use her clubfoot as a crutch for pity, but she found herself doing so anyway. And I think some could probably see her as like very hard-headed, very stubborn, but I think that her stubbornness and her brashness came from a place of self-preservation. It gave her like a false bravado to hide behind. Like she gave people an opportunity to not like her on the basis of her attitude, but it wouldn't be because of her clubfoot. Like it's in some way it gave her more control. And I thought it was very good that her favorite book was The Wizard of Oz, because in a lot of ways her story really parallels that story. I'm not gonna get into too much of that because, again, I don't like to give spoilers, because if you haven't read it and you want to, I really want you to. So I'm not gonna get too far into that. Melissa is the other sister. She marries into the wealthiest family in town, and she comes from one of the poorest families in town. So it's a real culture shock, right? She expects this sort of fairy tale ending, and she really struggles with the new lifestyle. In fact, she ends up in an abusive marriage, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Again, like, I know I say, like, some people might think, and I'm, like, making assumptions. I don't mean to do that, but it's just, I could see why people would think this, right? Some people would probably see her actions as very, like, weak, but I actually saw a lot of strength in her intentions and in her heart. The book takes place in the 30s. It's possible that she didn't even know she had the option to get out of a marriage like women do today, right? It was a very different mentality. It was a different time. And I'm not obviously making excuses, but it's just, I don't know that it was necessarily weakness as opposed to just like not even knowing you could, right? Then you have Pa and Helen. I don't know that we ever know Pa's first name, but Pa is Kathryn and Melissa's dad. He's doing his best, trying to stick it out on the farm. After their mother passed away during childbirth, he remarried Helen, who now wants them to leave, get the hell out of Oklahoma, and go to Indianapolis, which is where she's from. Her family is still there. And, compounded with all of this drought and, famine and depression and all of this, Helen has had like several miscarriages. She keeps getting pregnant and she keeps losing the baby. And so finally, after Melissa marries and goes to live with her husband, Helen is finally able to convince Pa to take Kathryn up north to Indianapolis. And she sort of, I don't want to say baits him, but tells him that, hey, we could actually get Kathryn the surgery to fix her foot. And, that actually would be better for everyone. Melissa's good. She's married. She's doing her own thing. And now it's time to take care of us, And then there's also another character that comes in. I'm going to talk about her a little bit, but again, not too much because I don't want to give too much away. But her name is Annie. She's a poor single mother in town. She's got a bunch of kids. She's by herself. Melissa tries to connect with her and help her, but Annie has a lot of pride of her own and doesn't come easily. Melissa really, really has to earn her friendship, but they end up like being like foxhole sisters, which I love. And finally, I think the last character that I want to mention is the dust. And I love, personally, when a town or the land or some inanimate object becomes a major character in the story. So in this story, it's really like the glue that holds everything together and yet creates these holes in their lives. So I'm going to give my own sort of synopsis of the book. Really going to try not to give anything away. And I'm going to, sorry to be kind of a tease, but I'm going to get to like a certain point and then I'm just going to stop because I really, really don't want to spoil anything. So here we go. Kathryn and Melissa cling to each other after their mom passes away. Like I said, she died in childbirth, having Kathryn, which is also kind of part of the chip on her shoulder that Kathryn carries around. Melissa ends up falling in love with the town's most eligible bachelor, marries him, and moves out. His name is Henry. So with Melissa out of the house, Kathryn's teenage angst, along with all like this stuff with the Depression era, the dust everywhere, the drought, dealing with clubfoot, and really just all the wonderful things that come with being the age of 14, her angst just totally takes hold of her, and it creates this rift between her and her father. And she makes him feel like he kind of has to choose between his youngest daughter and his wife. And his wife, Helen, as I mentioned earlier, has had several miscarriages since they got married, and this last one really takes a toll on her. She convinces Pa that they need to leave Oklahoma and go to Indianapolis. That's where she's originally from. She still has a lot of family there, and she really makes it sound enticing because she offers to help Kathryn get the surgery to fix her foot finally. Ultimately, he does agree, and Kathryn just feels so betrayed. Like, she's so angry at him for not trying to stick it out and stay in Oklahoma. She sees it as her home and she doesn't want to leave her home. She doesn't know anything else. So as Kathryn and Melissa are saying goodbye, Melissa gives Kathryn her fancy monogrammed handkerchief, which actually was a gift from her new husband. And Kathryn tells Melissa to keep their copy of The Wizard of Oz that they've bonded over throughout the years. I'm mentioning these because they do come into play. So now Kathryn, Helen, and Pa are heading out on the road, right? So they're driving along and a dust storm comes through. Now Kathryn is sitting in the back of the pickup truck, like in the bed of the truck. And this scene really parallels Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz getting swept up in the tornado, because she, like, the dust is coming and they're trying to get Kathryn to come inside the truck and she's not doing it. And so, I mean, these storms were crazy. Like, it's just nuts. So through the commotion, the handkerchief that Melissa gave her gets caught up in the wind and Kathryn goes running after it. And now Pa and Helen can't find her because they can't see her. Like, this is my understanding, like, you could put your hand in front of your face and not be able to see it. Like, that's how bad these things were. And they end up getting back on the road without her. Like, they left her by herself. It's crazy. Like, in some ways, I'm like, that would never happen. I would never, ever leave my kid. But I don't know. I didn't grow up in the 30s. I didn't grow up during all of this. This was a lot. I can't imagine, and it is fiction. This isn't a real story, right? So now we've got 14-year-old Kathryn on the side of the road by herself with a clubfoot and a brace on her leg. It's like Dorothy waking up, but instead of being in this wonderful magical land with lots of beautiful color everywhere and munchkins, she's still in Kansas and completely alone. Until this random fella drives up and offers her a ride. And let me tell you, this guy is a piece of work. He tells Kathryn that he can make it rain. So remember, there's big drought going on. He's got these big fireworks in his car, and he's going to use it to make rain. And there's a town that has paid him to come do just that. This was a real thing at the time. He's basically selling like a weather version of snake oil, right? And so then we go back to Melissa, and she is starting to learn just how much her marriage is not at all what she thought or hoped it was going to be. Her eyes were opened by just how different her world is from her old world. She gets involved with the ladies at church, with the ladies auxiliary, which, side note, I meant to look this up because I have no idea what a ladies auxiliary is. Like, where did that come from? Like, what was the original purpose? Why did they call it an auxiliary? These are questions that I think about all the time. Anyway, it gives her something to do during the day. And as part of her new duties, she's tasked with bringing food to Annie Gale. She's a single mom on the wrong side of the tracks. But Annie doesn't want her help. Annie's pride gets the best of her as one of the poorest girls in town is now one of the richest. And she's kind of like, who the hell do you think you are? I remember where you're from. Do you remember where you're from? Now you think you're all high and mighty because you married the wealthiest guy in town. That wasn't actually said in the book, but that's what I picture happening. And again, there's a lot that happens, and I don't want to give everything away because I really do want you to read this for yourself. But long story short, Melissa ends up offering Annie a job cleaning her house, but Henry, Melissa's husband, is livid about this arrangement and essentially forbids Melissa from letting Annie in the house anymore. And Melissa ignores him because she knows, not only does she need help with the house, but Annie needs the work, right? She's a single mom. So she does it anyway. And she actually brings, so Annie, when she comes, which she does end up doing, she brings her daughter with her. And as she's cleaning, Melissa reads The Wizard of Oz to her. It's really sweet. And now I warned you a little while ago that I was going to stop at a certain point. And this is where I'm going to stop. I really don't want to give too much away. But I'm going to just say that Kathryn and Melissa are both going through their own sort of coming of age stories that in some way kind of parallel each other and parallel The Wizard of Oz. I just think that their eyes are opening to what the world can really be like when we get outside what's familiar and what we've known and experienced. Not only do these eye-opening experiences help us grow up, but they can also help us appreciate where we came from and have more understanding and compassion toward others. I think that's why Melissa really felt, like she really wanted to help Annie, because she's been there. And I do think that her intentions were pure. For me personally, I think that I related more to Kathryn in the story, because for me growing up, I always saw my childhood experiences as sort of a disability or something that would hold me back and always put me at a disadvantage. But I've learned to not only come to grips with them, but be grateful for them, because it's those same experiences that felt like such a hindrance at the time became the very things that made me who I am. And it's those same experiences that introduced me to people I never would have met, lives that I never would have been touched by, and lives that I never would have impacted. Overall, this book was really good. I love when a book leaves you with a certain feeling, like in your gut, that you can't quite describe and you can't stop talking or thinking about it for days. You know what I mean? So that is If It Rains by Jennifer L. Wright. I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, please like, subscribe, and tell others about it. I would love that. If you didn't like it, you can totally keep that to yourself. Thanks. But seriously, I hope that the rest of your day is amazing. I hope that you see the beauty that is all around you. I hope that you are grateful for what you have. And I hope that you make this one for the books. See you next time.